My wife told her sister she married down and called our life ordinary. Then I found her text with her ex and $20,000 missing. I didn't scream. I froze the accounts, packed my ring, and walked out. Quietly, I didn't mean to hear it. I was just taking the trash out, like I did every Thursday night. It was one of those quiet, routine things you do without thinking. I opened the garage door, dragging 2 black bags behind me, and that's when I heard her voice. Not loud, not angry, just honest. "I'm telling you, I feel like I married down," she said. I froze. The voice was Sabrina's, my wife. And she wasn't talking to me. She was on the phone, tucked in the far corner of the garage near the second fridge, her back to me. She hadn't noticed I walked in. I didn't breathe. "I mean, I love him, sure," she continued, her voice casual like she was talking about what she ate for lunch. "But sometimes I just think." I settled. James is doing so well now, VP at his firm. He's got the house, the cars. I look at my life, and it just feels small in comparison. James, her ex. My heart sank so fast it made me dizzy. I stood there, motionless, fingers clenched around the tied-off plastic of the trash bags. Sabrina let out a quiet laugh, not mean, just soft and tired. "He's a good man." He is. But I keep wondering what my life would have looked like if I waited. If I didn't jump into something so ordinary. Ordinary. I didn't hear the rest. Or maybe I did, but it didn't register. The blood was pounding in my ears like a drum. I turned slowly, quietly, and backed out of the garage like I was walking in a dream. She never saw me. Never knew I was there. I dropped the bags in the bin outside, then stood in the driveway for a long time, trying to make sense of what I just heard. The words repeated themselves in my head like a broken record. Married down. Settled. Ordinary. Dinner that night was exactly the same as always. She asked if I liked the pasta. I said it was good. She smiled, kissed my cheek when she cleared the plates, and I smiled back. She had no idea. And I sat there, chewing each bite like it was sawdust, nodding at her stories, hearing nothing, feeling everything. My stomach twisted at how easily she pretended. Or maybe she wasn't pretending at all. Maybe that was the scariest part. Maybe to her, nothing was wrong. But everything was wrong. Later that night, I stared at the ceiling while she slept beside me, her breathing soft and even. I couldn't sleep. My mind kept replaying that one sentence. I feel like I'm married down. I never thought of myself as rich or flashy, but I thought I was enough. I thought love, real love, didn't care about titles or cars or square footage. Apparently, I was wrong. It was like something inside me cracked, and I couldn't tape it back together. That garage door conversation wasn't just painful, it was revealing. It showed me who she really was when I wasn't in the room. It showed me what I meant to her, a choice she settled for, a step down. And now, everything I thought we built felt like it was built on sand. A few days passed before I started noticing things. It started with her phone. She used to leave it on the kitchen counter or plug it in next to mine at night. But suddenly it was always with her, in her back pocket, face down on the bathroom sink while she showered. She turned the screen away from me when we watched TV. And when I asked who she was texting, she'd give vague answers. Just Steph, or work stuff. Always quick, always dismissive. Then there were the late nights. She started saying she needed to stay at the office longer. Deadlines. Meetings that ran over. Once or twice, I didn't question it. But it started happening 2 or 3 times a week. Then she started deleting her messages. I wasn't snooping, not yet. But I saw her swipe and clear entire conversations, always with that same blank expression. I told myself I trusted her. I wanted to believe that what I heard in the garage was a moment of weakness, frustration, maybe. But that wasn't the truth, and deep down I already knew it. The moment came on a Sunday afternoon. She was upstairs showering before we met her parents for dinner. Her phone was on the bed, screen lit up. A preview popped up. "James, still thinking about you. Coffee again soon?" I stared at it, frozen. Then I made a choice. I picked up the phone. My hands were sweating. My heart beat so hard I could hear it in my ears. I entered her code, her birthday. It worked. The messages were all there. Dozens of them. Texts, photos, late-night, miss you confessions. Mentions of, if things were different, and we always had that spark. I felt sick. But the worst part wasn't the emotional garbage, it was the bank app notification she hadn't cleared. I tapped it. She transferred money out of our joint savings into a private account I didn't know about. Multiple transfers over the past 4 months. I did the math in my head. $20,000. I sat down on the edge of the bed and just stared at the screen. My hands had stopped shaking. My body went cold, like I had stepped outside into a snowstorm. I took screenshots of everything. The texts, the account activity, the photos. I sent them to my private email and deleted the outgoing messages. By the time she walked in, towel around her head, smiling, everything was already back in place. I handed her the phone casually. "You had a text from Steph," I lied. "Oh, I'll check it later," she said, wiping steam off her face. I nodded and walked out of the room. I didn't confront her. Not yet. I didn't yell or throw accusations. Instead, I went downstairs, opened my laptop, and started taking notes. Lawyers, account access, debt status. I made a list of everything I'd need to do before I left. Shock was gone. Sadness, too. All I felt now was this cold, hollow calculation. She was planning a new life behind my back, and now, so was I. 2 weeks after I found the messages, she said she had to stay late again. I played dumb. Everything okay at work? I asked as she brushed her hair in the mirror. She nodded, not meeting my eyes. It's just inventory. We're behind. I smiled like I believed her. But I already had a plan. An hour after she left, I followed her. Not in some movie-style spy way, just careful, calm. I waited 10 minutes, then grabbed my jacket and got in the car. I already knew the address. James had sent her the name of the restaurant in one of his texts. It wasn't far, one of those trendy rooftop places downtown. I parked across the street and waited, engine off, lights out. And there they were. She stepped out of her car first. He pulled up 5 minutes later. I watched them hug. Too long, too familiar. She touched his arm. He laughed at something she said. Then they went inside together. I sat there for 15 more minutes, phone in hand, watching the entrance. Took a few pictures, nothing dramatic, just clear enough. Her coat, his hand on her lower back. Her smile, the one I hadn't seen in months. I didn't feel rage. Not the kind you scream about. What I felt was worse, a dull, growing weight in my chest, like a bruise spreading across my ribs. I didn't wait for them to come out. I didn't need more. I drove home. When she walked in later, coat off, purse slung lazily over her shoulder, I was already in bed with the lamp on, pretending to scroll through my phone. Dinner run late. I asked without looking up. She yawned and shrugged. Yeah, we got stuck going over sales numbers. I didn't even eat. I'm starving. I nodded. There's leftover lasagna. She kissed my forehead like she always did and padded off to the kitchen. I turned off the lamp. That was probably the hardest part, acting like everything was normal. Sitting across from her at the dinner table the next night while she told me about her coworkers, about a marketing campaign she was pretending to care about. All I could think about was the way she smiled at him. How relaxed she looked outside that restaurant, her body leaning into his without hesitation. I hadn't seen that version of her in years. In private, I was a mess. Quiet but unraveling. I barely slept. My stomach was in knots. I'd stand in the shower and press my forehead against the tile, breathing in steam and counting backward from 100, just trying to stay upright. It wasn't just betrayal. It was identity loss. This woman I loved, this life we built, it was all slipping through my fingers. I wasn't a husband anymore. I was a placeholder, a safety net, a name on a lease. And every day, I felt myself becoming less of who I was. I spent the next week in silence, but I wasn't idle. Every night after Sabrina went to bed, I stayed up in the guest room with the door closed. I went through every shared account, downloaded every document, copied every important file from the home computer. Tax returns, bank statements, titles, insurance policies, anything I'd need once I was no longer we but me. I bought a portable safe and tucked it in the trunk of my car with all my personal documents. Birth certificate, social security card, passport. I changed the passwords on my personal accounts. I opened a checking account at a new bank and had my direct deposit rerouted. It took 4 days to separate my financial life from hers without making a sound. I packed slowly, a little at a time. A jacket here, a pair of shoes there. Nothing big enough to raise suspicion. Just enough that when I left, I wouldn't have to come back. She didn't notice. Of course she didn't. She was always on her phone now, eyes glued to the screen, giggling at messages she didn't share, walking out of the room when she answered calls. She didn't know I saw the way her face changed when his name popped up. She didn't know I had stopped asking questions because I already knew all the answers. The last thing I packed was my wedding ring. I took it off that morning, placed it in a small jewelry box, and left it on the dresser next to the lamp. I didn't write a note. I didn't leave a letter. There was nothing left to say. I walked out the door with one duffel bag and a backpack. Everything else, the house, the furniture, the memories, I left behind. Dennis answered on the first knock. He didn't ask questions. Just stepped aside and let me in. You can stay as long as you need, he said. That was it. I sat on his worn couch, hands still gripping my bag, trying to remember how to breathe. Dennis didn't push. He handed me a beer and sat in the armchair, flipping on the game without a word. That was exactly what I needed, not comfort, not advice. Just space. That night, I turned off my phone. I knew she'd call. I knew I'd wake up to missed calls and frantic texts. But I didn't care. She didn't deserve my words anymore. I didn't want a confrontation. I didn't want her tears or her excuses. I wanted quiet. I wanted control. And silence gave me both. In the following days, I stayed off the grid. I didn't check social media. I didn't reach out to mutual friends. I let the world spin without me. And with each passing hour, the weight on my chest loosened. I went for long walks. Ate meals alone without someone across the table pretending everything was fine. For the first time in years, I heard my own thoughts without her voice in the background. There was no dramatic goodbye. No suitcase scene. No door slammed shut. Just a quiet exit, a ring on a dresser, and the soft click of a door behind me. She never saw it coming. But that wasn't the point. I didn't leave to punish her. I left because I couldn't keep living like a ghost in my own home. And in that silence I chose, I found the first fragile pieces of something I hadn't felt in a long, long time. Peace. The first thing I did the next morning was freeze the joint checking account. It wasn't about revenge. It was about drawing a line, a clean, unmistakable line. I transferred my half into my new account and let her sit untouched. I wasn't going to drain it. I just wasn't going to let her keep using my income like nothing had changed. I also canceled the shared credit cards. I left her a separate card we'd always called the household expenses card, with a low limit. I figured it would take her a day, maybe two, before she noticed. Dennis had an old weight bench and some dusty dumbbells set up in the garage. I started using them every morning. Not out of some sudden fitness obsession. I just needed something to do with the tight, angry energy that lived in my chest. Push-ups, squats, anything to make my muscles burn more than my thoughts did. At night, I started seeing a therapist. Her name was Grace. She didn't ask about the affair at first. She just asked how I was sleeping. I told her the truth, badly. Every night my brain reran the same reel, her voice in the garage, the text on her phone, the fake smiles over dinner. Betrayal trauma, Grace said softly. It's real. And it messes with your wiring. She gave me exercises, breathing techniques, tools for when the bitterness bubbled up and threatened to swallow everything. It wasn't magic, but it helped. Sabrina started texting after 3 days. At first, they were frantic. Where are you? Did something happen? Please call me. I'm freaking out. Then came the accusations. You're being cruel. This is emotional abuse. You can't just disappear. And eventually, concern. I'm worried about you. Are you okay? I mean it. I didn't respond to any of it. Not because I didn't feel anything, but because I felt too much. If I replied, even once, I knew she'd pull me right back into the emotional loop. The gaslighting. The half-truths. The spinning of her actions into something that made sense only in her world. So I chose silence. And slowly, that silence became power. I watched from a distance as things started to slip for her. Small things at first, charges declined on the old card, then a mutual friend mentioned she had asked to borrow money, just until things settle. She didn't know I had already filed a formal separation notice with our bank. Didn't know I had flagged her $20,000 stash in my discovery paperwork to the lawyer. Let her scramble. I wasn't interested in watching her fall apart, but I wasn't going to catch her this time either. Dennis said something to me one night as we drank beers on his porch. You know what this looks like? He asked, tipping his head toward me. It looks like a guy learning how to stop bleeding. I stared out at the yard and didn't say anything for a while. But yeah, that's exactly what it felt like. About 3 weeks after I left, I logged into the home security app out of habit. We'd installed cameras ourselves, 2 outside, 1 in the entry hall. She never remembered to change the password, and I wasn't ready to let go completely. Part of me still needed to see. What I saw was chaos. The front hallway was a mess. Boxes scattered, some half-opened, like she'd started packing and then stopped. She looked thinner, paler, like she hadn't slept. She paced a lot, talked to herself sometimes, sat on the stairs and just stared at nothing for long stretches. One night, I watched her scream into her phone and throw it across the room. Another, she collapsed into the armchair by the door and buried her face in her hands. I didn't feel satisfaction. Not exactly. It was something colder than that. Detachment. She was unraveling, not because I yelled or slammed a door, but because I didn't. Silence had become the loudest sound in her world. And outside the house, the narrative was shifting. I started getting texts from mutual friends, the kind of vague, polite messages people send when they think they're being neutral. Hey man, heard you've been going through it. Hope you're okay. Just checking in. Sabrina said things ended kind of suddenly. And then I ran into Kyle. He lived 2 houses down and had always been decent. We bumped into each other at the gas station. He gave me this weird, hesitant smile. Hey. Everything okay, man? Yeah, I said, casual. Why? He scratched the back of his neck. It's just. Sabrina's been telling people you had some kind of breakdown. That you left in the middle of the night without explaining anything. That you've been unstable for a while. There it was. She was building a story. And I guess she thought silence gave her permission to fill in the blanks. I didn't defend myself to Kyle. I didn't need to. He gave me a look, the kind you give someone you don't completely believe is crazy, and nodded. Well, let me know if you ever want to grab a drink. When I got back to Dennis's place, I sat on the back porch, phone in hand, just thinking. There was a version of me, months ago, that would have broken down at this, at the idea of being painted as the villain. But that version was gone. People were going to believe whatever made them comfortable. And Sabrina? She was just trying to protect her image, the curated life, the perfect couple, the version where she didn't wreck her marriage for nostalgia and bank transfers. Let her have her version. I had my evidence. I had the truth. And more than that, I had a plan. I kept showing up to therapy, kept lifting in the garage. I got a new haircut, started cooking my own meals again. Small wins. Quiet ones. But they were mine. The legal battle was coming. I could feel it in the air, like a storm on the horizon. She hadn't filed anything yet, but the silence was too calculated, too rehearsed, like she was waiting for the right moment to strike. Let her wait. I wasn't afraid anymore. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't the one trying to hold everything together. And for once, I didn't feel broken. I felt ready. It started with a message. Sabrina, can we meet? Just once. Please. Before the paperwork goes through. I stared at the screen for a long time. Part of me didn't want to reply. But the rest of me, the calmer, colder part, understood this was necessary. Not for her. For me. I chose a coffee shop halfway between Dennis's place and the old house. Neutral ground. Bright, public, safe. I showed up 10 minutes early and grabbed a corner table. I set my phone on the table, screen down, then quietly hit record. She arrived 3 minutes later, already there when I looked up from my coffee. She looked tired. Her hair was done, makeup on, but there was something worn out around her eyes, like the effort to keep up appearances was finally getting to her. Hi, she said softly as she slid into the seat across from me. I nodded once. Hi. There was a long pause. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out a small tissue packet. I'm not here to argue, she started. I just wanted to explain. I didn't say anything. I just watched her. I know you found out about James, she continued, fingers twisting the tissue in her hands. I figured that much when you disappeared. I didn't expect you to leave like that. I thought maybe we'd talk about it, or fight, or something. More silence from me. She sighed. It wasn't what you think. I wasn't going to leave you. James and we talked, but it wasn't serious. It was just coffee. A connection. I felt like I lost myself in our marriage, and he reminded me of who I used to be. Who you used to be, I repeated, my voice quiet but steady. Before you married down, right? Her face twitched. She looked away. You heard that, she whispered. I didn't answer. She looked back at me, eyes glossy now. That was me being stupid. Talking out of frustration. I didn't mean it the way it sounded. I was venting. I pulled out my phone and unlocked the screen. One tap, and I opened the photo album labeled Proof. I turned the screen toward her. Screenshots. Dozens of them. Text between her and James. Bank transfers. Voice memos from our smart home system, one of them her phone call with her sister in the garage. She stared at it all, her mouth slightly open. I knew everything I said. Weeks before I left. I knew when you lied, where you went, who you were texting. I even know about the separate account you were hiding. Her hand moved toward her cup, then pulled back. I'm not here for an apology, I said flatly. I'm here to make it clear that I see you. Fully. I know exactly who I've been living with. She was shaking her head now, slowly. You don't understand what it was like, being stuck in a version of life that didn't feel real. I thought we were supposed to have more. Be more. And you think James was the answer to that? No, she said quickly. But he reminded me of a time when I still had choices. I leaned back. You did have choices. You still do. But you don't get to rewrite what you did just because you're scared now. She wiped her eyes and said nothing. The lawyer will be in touch, I said. You'll get everything on paper. I'm not out to ruin you, Sabrina. But I'm not here to save you either. She nodded slowly. She started, but the words trailed off. I stood up. Take care of yourself. She didn't follow me. She didn't beg. She just sat there, shoulders slumped, a woman realizing too late that the person she dismissed had already walked away. A week after that final meeting, the divorce paperwork was signed. No drama. No screaming matches. Just scanned documents, e-signatures, and a quiet call from my lawyer confirming it was done. Legally, emotionally, financially, Sabrina and I were finished. I didn't celebrate. There wasn't anything joyful about it. But I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Stillness. A kind of mental quiet that let me sit without checking my phone, without wondering what came next. I moved into a small rental on the edge of town. Nothing fancy. One bedroom, open kitchen, big windows that let in the morning light. The kind of place where nothing reminded me of her. Nothing reminded me of us. The first night I slept there, I stayed up late sitting on the floor, eating takeout straight from the container, watching the ceiling fan spin. And for once, I didn't feel like I had to be anywhere else. It wasn't happiness, but it was peace. I threw myself into the basics, laundry, dishes, groceries, going back to the gym regularly. I didn't need to fill every moment with distraction. I just needed to show myself that I could live a life without walking on eggshells. Grace, my therapist, called it reclaiming rhythm. I called it surviving the aftermath. Dennis still checked in on me every few days. He came over one Saturday with a six-pack and some old action DVDs. We didn't talk about the past. Just watched Bruce Willis blow things up while we sat on milk crates and laughed too hard at bad dialogue. It felt like something normal people did. One evening, a couple months into the new place, I was standing in line at a local coffee shop when I heard a familiar voice behind me. Eric. I turned around. It was Marion, Sabrina's old college friend. The one who always brought wine to dinner parties and knew way too much about everyone's business. We hadn't spoken since before I left, but she smiled at me now, a little cautiously. Hey, I said, unsure how this was going to go. I heard, she said gently. About everything. I nodded. Yeah. She hesitated, then stepped closer, lowering her voice. I just want you to know, a lot of us were rooting for you, and we saw what was happening, even when you didn't. That caught me off guard. Really, she said. Sabrina's always been complicated. I gave a small smile. That's one word for it. We ended up grabbing coffee together and sat by the window, just talking about nothing important. Music, movies, how the town had changed. It wasn't a date. It wasn't anything really. But for the first time, I saw someone look at me without expectations. Just a person, not a paycheck or a place to hide their regrets. As I drove home later that night, I realized something. I wasn't angry anymore. Not really. What happened with Sabrina hurt. It would always hurt. But it didn't own me anymore. The lies, the betrayal, the gaslighting. It was all real, but it was behind me now. A chapter I'd finished, even if it didn't end the way I expected. And most surprising of all, I wasn't bitter. Because I had made it out. I had faced something I thought would destroy me. And I walked away not just alive, but stronger. Sharper. Quieter inside. That night, as I got ready for bed, I thought back to the garage, the exact moment everything shattered. I remembered standing there with trash bags in my hands, hearing her voice say, I feel like I'm married down. I remember how that version of me froze. How he didn't know what to do. But the man brushing his teeth in the mirror now? He wasn't the same. He knew who he was. He didn't need anyone to validate his worth. He didn't need permission to walk away. And he sure as hell wasn't ordinary. He was free.